G'day, my name's Roger Osborne. In this video, I'm going to show you the best baits for fishing off the beach. And I'm going to show you exactly how to put each of those baits on your hook. I'll be showing you the baits for all the popular species: Bream, whiting, Flathead, Tailor, Mulloway, Trevally, all the different things you can catch off the beach. And if you're struggling catching beach worms, which are an amazing bait, check out my website where I have my masterclass beach worm series. That will get you catching beach worms. So I'm going to head home in a few minutes and I'm going to show you exactly how to put on each bait. An excellent bait for beach fishing is the humble pilchard. Pilchards are great because so many fish like pilchards. Fish like Bream, Flathead, Salmon, Tailor, Trevally, even the mighty Mulloway. And the other awesome thing about pilchards is that they're so readily available. You can get them at most service stations, and even if you didn't have time to catch your own bait and you just went down to the beach with pilchards, that's a really good thing. When you put a pilchard on a ganged hook, the top hook needs to go through the eye of the pilchard. Once you've done this hundreds of times, you just do it without thinking. But initially, if you haven't done it very much, you need to line up your ganged hooks like so that you know where the first hook will enter the pilchard. So if we do that, let's do it this way. I'll put it around this way, sorry. Okay, so I'll line that up like so. So that means my first hook is going to enter the pilchard about here. So you put the hook in, pin it like that, swing that up around and turn that. Second hook goes in and through, and then the third hook goes through the eye of the pilchard as such. And so that is your pilchard bait on a set of 3 ganged hooks. I like to trim the tail off the pilchard, and I'm going to cut it in half, about there like that. Then I'm getting my hook, putting my hook here, pulling the hook all the way through, then pinning the hook like so, putting a half hitch around the end of the bait like so, which holds the bait in place, or holds it more firmly on the hook. So with the other half of the pilchard, I just put the hook through the eye socket and then pin it through the middle of the body. This way you get 2 baits out of every pilchard, which is awesome. I also use pilchards as my hand bait when I'm beach worming. So if you're interested in learning more about beach worming, check out some of my other videos. Now I'm going to show you how I put a beach worm on a hook when I'm fishing off the beach. I use a fairly large long shank hook in the range of size 1 or 1.0 because I like to use a large worm bait. So essentially what I do is I put the hook in his mouth. Can you see that? I've actually put the hook in the worm's mouth and I'm threading it straight down his middle or his throat. So all I'm doing is I put the hook in the worm's mouth and I'm threading it up the hook like so, just keeping the hook in the center of the worm. Then what I actually like to do is I like to pull the worm's head up above the hook and onto the line by about 2 or 3 centimeters. So the end of my hook is about there, and then I chop it off at about there. So essentially that is, let's get the sand off, that is the size of my worm bait. Well, when you catch your own worms, you can be generous because you catch them in abundance and you don't have to be too concerned about how much you use. I'm just putting another worm bait on. The bait I put on just a second ago, we used his head. This one, it's the same thing. I'm just sliding the worm on the hook, up the middle. I like to leave some sand on the worm because it just makes it easier to hold the worms. So you just give them a bit of a crumb, like a crumb cutlet. And what I'm doing is, while I'm having a bit of a worm here, I've just caught a couple of worms. I'm going to throw a line out and just leave it set on the beach while I'm worming. You can see that when you get fresh bait and you just catch it fresh and throw it in the water, how easy it is to catch fish. Look at that. We're not even really seriously trying to fish. We're trying to catch worms, but we keep catching fish. Anyway. Now we're going to move on to some slab baits. I'm going to show you 2 ways of doing a slab bait. I'm going to do one for a Mulloway, which will be a larger slab bait, and then a smaller slab bait which I would use for fishing for bream. Here I've got a piece of mullet that I caught recently and I've salted and frozen. First I'm going to cut a large piece that I would use as a Mulloway bait. So I'm just going to cut this piece here. I might just trim the side a little bit. This is the size bait that I'd use off the beach fishing for a Mulloway. I may use a slightly larger piece, but this is a pretty good example. And I've got my hooks here that I use. I've got my 9/0 hook and my 5/0 hook. So what I'm going to do here is I like to go through the flesh side and coming out the skin side first, and then I'm going to pin this hook about in the middle like so. So there's my first hook, and you can see that the barb is nicely exposed. Then the same way I'm going to go through the flesh side with the large keeper hook and then pin that through there as well. So basically you can see here I have my slab bait with the barbs nicely exposed. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a half hitch, just so that this hook doesn't slip. I've done a half hitch on that hook. So there you have a nice slab bait that you can throw off the beach to fish for Mulloway. You catch big Tailor on that slab bait as well. Okay, so now I'm going to do a small slab bait targeting bream or other species like Flathead or Trevally. So I'm going to cut a piece of this slab, this fillet, like so. When I'm using smaller hooks, I don't like the slab to be too thick because I want to make sure that the barb of the hook is protruding. So I'm actually going to shave a bit off this because I don't want it to be too thick. So here I've got a lovely, beautiful, look at that, how awesome is that? Fish is going to love that. So what I'm going to do here, this is how you set up for bream. I'm going to take my main hook, I'm going to put it through the flesh side and out this side and pull it through. Then I'm going to pin it down here towards the end of the slab, like that. So there you can see I've got my main hook in there. And then in this case I have my stinger or my keeper hook. So here is my stinger hook. You can see that, my nice stinger. And I'm just going to actually put that through the end of the slab like so. So that's my slab bait with a stinger hook in the end. And that's a perfect bait for bream, snapper, flathead, etc. So now we're going to show you how to put squid on your hook and use squid for bait. I'm going to show you two ways to do that. I'm going to do a small squid bait, which is good for bream and fish like that. And then I'm also going to do a larger squid bait, which would be good for Mulloway or kingfish. So let's get started. All right, we might do a small squid bait first. So we don't need a big strip, so I'm actually going to cut this bit of squid like so. Then if I'm doing a small squid bait, we might make it about that big. And then I like to sort of taper it a bit at the top, so if I can put a half hitch on if I want. Yep. Okay, so I have my size 3 suicide hook here with a size 4, so 3/0 and a size 4 stinger. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to put this hook through the squid here, pull it all the way through like that, and then towards the end of the little slab of squid I'm going to put the hook through, so it's like that. Then I'm going to do, I think right with my stinger hook actually, I might start on this side and then put that through like so, so that I've got my stinger hook in there, and then I'm going to put a half hitch around the top of the stinger. I'm just going to go like that and put a half hitch around there just to hold it in place. So essentially that's my small squid bait that I would use for a bream if I was fishing off the beach, or if I'm fishing off the rocks onto a sand bottom. That's how I'd rig that up. So now we're going to do a larger bait, which is more suitable to a fish like a mulloway. So I'm cutting it a little bit wider, and I'm going to go to a bit of a point with that as well. So you can see I've got quite a decent sized strip bait there, and this time I'm actually using two 6/0 hooks here. So I have two 6/0 suicides. You know, for some baits, if you're using a standalone hook, you'd use a bigger hook than a 6/0. You'd use like a 9/0 or a 10/0 hook. Okay, so now I'm going to put this larger bait on for a mulloway. So I'm going to put this hook through the squid here. Squid's nice and soft, so it's easy to get it through. Then I'm going to hook it there, so I've got that hook pinned in position. Okay, so then I'm going to put the second hook in. Actually, I'll do it about there. And pull that through. Put that second hook in, like so. My two hooks. Then I'm going to do a half hitch around the top of the bait to hold it in place. So essentially, there you have my slab bait with a half hitch. That bait there is about 14 centimetres long. I'm just going to put this other small bait next to it to contrast. So you can see there you've got my small bream size bait, which would be about 5 centimetres in length, and then you've got the bigger bait, which is going to be for a mulloway. And if you were fishing off a rock platform onto sand bottom, you also might catch a snapper on this bait as well. Our next amazing bait for beach fishing is live potty mullet. Live mullet are an epic bait for mulloway and for big flathead, and some other species that maybe they're big salmon, or if there happen to be some kingfish cruising along the beach. So I'm going to show you how to put a live mullet on your hook. So you can see here I've got a live mullet. This guy is probably about 15 centimetres long. Now when you're putting on a live mullet, you don't want to put the hook through his backbone. His backbone runs about down the centre of the fish. If I was to put the hook in about here, I'd kill the fish and it wouldn't be alive for bait. I need to hook it along the back here, but in between where the backbone is and the top of the fish. So generally about this far down is where I'd hook it. I like to hook it between these two fins here. You can hook it higher up the fish, probably doesn't matter too much, but in this case here I'm going to pin the hook through there like that. So you can see this mullet, you can see where I've got the hook in between those the two sets of fins towards the back and up above the backbone so that I don't kill the mullet. I'm actually fishing down by a lake while I'm doing this demonstration on baiting the mullet, my live mullet. But they do catch mulloway in this lake, and there's certainly some very big flatheads, so that's what I'm really targeting with this mullet while I'm down here by the lake. But these are an absolutely first-class bait off the beach. A little bit of work in catching them, but certainly worth it. I'm just going to burley up a bit, throw a small amount of bread in the water. The mullet will all come around and start attacking it, and then I just put a tiny little piece of bread on my size 12 hook and throw it in the midst of the mullet. So I just chuck my bit of bread out there, and you'll watch in just a second. The mullet will all, you can see them already starting to chop the surface and eat the bread. And now that's where I'm going to throw my bait. When you're catching small mullet with a line rather than using a mullet trap, you don't use any sinker and you use a really small hook. The brand of hook is Daiichi. It's a Japanese brand. It's a size 12 Daiichi hook. The bread must be fresh. I only take one slice at a time out of the loaf. I leave it in a plastic bag so that I keep all the bread nice and fresh. And you take a bit out of the middle of the bread. I just take a tiny little amount, and I don't squeeze it tight. You don't want to form it into a hard ball and I just poke the hook into the center of the bread like that. That's all I do. I don't squeeze it or anything, because also you want the bread to float. I don't actually wind my reel or use my reel. I'm just using it like a little flick rod. I only leave about 3 meters of line out from the end of the rod, and then I just... Whoa. It's a nice bait. The mighty yabby really is a top bait for fishing for whiting off the beach. And I'm going to show you now how to put a yabby on your hook. I like to use a long shank hook. And you get the yabby. He may bite you, but don't let that bother you too much. And you put the end of your hook, unfortunately, in the yabby's rear end. Right about there. And then you thread the hook. See, he doesn't like it, obviously. You thread the hook up the length of the yabby, somewhat like a worm. You thread him onto your hook, like so, and you keep going until the barb of your hook actually goes into the yabby's head. So you can see there, I've got the yabby on the hook, and the body of the yabby is down the shank of the hook. You've got the head there. I also like to put a little half hitch around the top of the yabby like that, just to hold him in position. So you can see there, that is the yabby on the hook, ready to go. Yabbies are not the most robust bait, and you have to be a little bit gentle when you're casting them. They're not that weak that they would fall off, but usually you don't have to cast very far off the beach when you're fishing for whiting and using yabbies. Most of the time, the fish just love them and swallow them, and you catch the fish anyway, even though they're not as hardy as other types of bait. But certainly very highly recommended and not too difficult to catch. So we're here down in Baril Lake on the south coast, and we're going to pump some yabbies. I'll show you how to pump yabbies. There are a few tricks to it. I've observed a lot of people over the years doing things and they're struggling, so I want to show you how to do it properly. So let's go. 2 in 1 sucker, yeah? Oh, 2 more. Look at that, good. Okay, that's a very productive little go. When you're pumping for yabbies, most of the yabbies you're going to get are going to be in your second and third drawing of the pump, or sucking if you like. I've seen a lot of people pumping for yabbies, and one of the mistakes that they make is they push the pump into the sand and pull at the same time. But really what you want to do when you're pumping for yabbies is your first pump is really getting you into the zone. I stick my pump into the sand maybe this far in my first pump. And sometimes you get yabbies in your first pump, but it's just getting you down into the zone, which is about this far under the surface. Then on my second pump, I push my pump right down to the bottom of the hole, and I don't push the pump further into the sand. I do a full... You want to actually fill this whole thing up with water and sand. You want to get as much suction and draw up as much as you can. If you pull and push at the same time, you're not actually going to completely fill your pump. You're really only getting half a pump. And I'm not sure when you start pumping a yabby hole if the yabbies freak out and they start to try and go deeper, but I like to try and get in there quickly and efficiently, get my first pump out of the way, and then my second, third and fourth pumps are my money pumps, where I'm really getting the yabbies. I'm going to do a few pumps around here. I think we'll get a lot of yabbies here. 1. So that's my first pump, and now I'm down in the zone, in the yabby zone. Yep. First pump, then down in the zone. I'm going to walk over here. See there. That's pretty good, eh? So there you have it, my video on the best baits for beach fishing. The baits that I've shown you in this video all work
really well for a variety of species. If this video has been helpful, give it a big thumbs up and subscribe. If you've got any questions, I'd love to know, so please put them in the comments. Don't forget, if you're struggling to catch beachworms and would like to learn, check out my beachworming masterclass on my website beachworming.com.au. I spent months creating the best possible training to teach you how to catch beachworms, so make sure you check it out. Happy fishing. I look forward to seeing you soon.